The observation room hummed with anticipation as Professor Marcus Reed adjusted his glasses, staring intently at the massive reinforced enclosure below. Behind its transparent walls, engineered to withstand the force of a small explosion, lay a habitat designed to house the most dangerous predators ever created in a laboratory. Subject 23 is ready for transfer, announced Dr. Yuki Tanaka, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. Though I still think this is madness, Marcus. She won't last an hour. In the preparation chamber, Dakota Winters sat perfectly still as technicians attached monitoring devices to her body. At 26, she possessed a quiet strength that had caught the attention of the Genesis Project's selection committee. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, her olive skin marked with small scars from a life that remained classified even to the project leaders. "Vital signs stable," reported one of the technicians. "Though I don't understand why she's so calm. Most subjects needed sedation by this point." Dakota's eyes fixed on the reinforced door leading to the enclosure. Behind it waited three of the most lethal creatures ever spawned in the Genesis labs, hybrid predators combining the deadliest traits from Earth's apex hunters with enhanced alien DNA. The last male subject had lasted exactly 8 minutes and 12 seconds. "Beginning transfer sequence," announced Dr. Tanaka. "Dakota, this is your final chance to withdraw from the experiment. No one would blame you." Dakota's response was barely above a whisper, but the microphones caught every word. "Open the door." The security team exchanged glances. They'd been briefed on her background, former military, special operations experience, but nothing in her file suggested she could survive what waited in that enclosure. The predators had been engineered specifically to hunt humans, enhanced with intelligence that made them far deadlier than natural creatures. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Dakota walked forward without hesitation, her bare feet silent on the temperature-controlled floor. The door sealed behind her with a sound of finality. In the observation room, dozens of screens displayed every angle of the enclosure. The predators were already moving, shadow-quick shapes with gleaming eyes and impossible geometries. The first was a fusion of big cat and something distinctly alien, its midnight fur rippling with bioluminescent patterns. The second moved like liquid mercury, its form constantly shifting between serpentine and humanoid. The third remained hidden, but its presence could be felt like a pressure in the air. "She's dead," muttered one of the security officers. "They are just toying with her now." But Dakota showed no fear. She moved to the center of the enclosure, her movements deliberately slow and controlled. When she spoke again, her voice carried an edge that made several observers shift uncomfortably. "You should have researched me more carefully," she said, knowing they were listening. "Asked why I volunteered. Why I specifically requested this experiment." The first predator launched itself from the shadows, a blur of claws and teeth. Dakota moved with impossible speed, pivoting away from death by millimeters. Her hand shot out, caught the creature's throat in a grip that should have been impossible for human muscles to maintain. In the observation room, alarms began blaring. Dakota's vital signs were changing, showing patterns that defied medical science. "What is she?" demanded Professor Reed, his face pale. "What have we done?" The second predator circled, its mercurous skin rippling with deadly intent. Dakota smiled, and in that smile was something that made even the engineered hunters hesitate. "You put me in a cage with predators," she said, her voice carrying an echo that hadn't been there before. "But you never asked what I was hunting." Her eyes began to glow with an inner fire, and beneath her skin, patterns of light coursed like living circuits. The predators backed away, their enhanced instincts suddenly screaming danger. "Lock down the facility," shouted Dr. Tanaka. "She's not the subject, she's the catalyst." But it was too late. The experiment had begun, but not the one they thought they were conducting. In the enclosure, Dakota Winters stood unchanged as chaos erupted around her, finally ready to fulfill her true mission. They had thought she would die. Instead, she was about to show them why she had chosen to be here, why she had waited so long for this exact moment. The predators weren't her enemies, they were about to become her weapons. The observation room fell silent as they watched Dakota move. The mercurous-skinned predator had launched a second attack, its liquid form spiraling through the air like a silver tornado. Instead of running, Dakota stepped directly into its path, her movements carrying an otherworldly grace that shouldn't have been possible for a human being. Impossible, breathed Dr. Tanaka, her fingers frozen above her console. Her reaction speed is beyond Olympic level. These readings, they can't be right. The predator's form enveloped Dakota, its metallic surface rippling with deadly intent. For a moment, she disappeared entirely within its mercury mass. The security team reached for their weapons, expecting to find only bones when the creature withdrew. Instead, Dakota emerged unscathed, her skin gleaming with a faint silver sheen where the predator had touched her. The creature itself had recoiled, its liquid form trembling as if it had encountered something that defied its basic understanding of prey. "My turn," Dakota whispered, and the words carried a resonance that made the observation room's windows vibrate. She moved with explosive force, her hand slicing through the air in an arc that left traces of light in its wake. The mercury predator split apart, its form separating into perfectly divided spheres that hung suspended in the air. But instead of falling, they began to orbit around Dakota like satellites around a planet. The third predator, the one that had remained hidden, finally revealed itself. It emerged from the shadows like a nightmare-given form, a creature of darkness and bone, its structure defying conventional anatomy. Multiple rows of eyes studied Dakota with an intelligence that seemed almost divine in its coldness. "Now that's interesting," Dakota said, tilting her head as she regarded the creature. "You're not just engineered, are you? They spliced something else into you. Something old. Something that remembers the dark between stars." Professor Reed's face had gone ashen. "How does she know about that?" "Those files were classified beyond top secret." The shadow predator moved like ink in water, its form flowing across the enclosure's floor and walls in patterns that hurt the eyes to follow. The big cat hybrid snarled, its bioluminescent markings pulsing with increasing intensity as it circled closer to Dakota. She stood unmoved at the center of this deadly orbit, her eyes now gleaming with the same otherworldly light as the predator's. When she spoke again, her voice had taken on layers of harmonics that made several observers step back from their monitors. "You really should have asked yourselves a simple question," she said, addressing the cameras directly. "Why would someone volunteer for this? Why would I specifically request to be put in here with them?" The shadow predator struck first, a tendril of darkness lashing out faster than the human eye could track. Dakota caught it with her bare hand, and where she touched it, light bloomed, not the harsh glare of laboratory illumination, but a deep, primal radiance that seemed to come from within her very cells. "Because I've been hunting too," she continued, as the darkness writhed in her grip. "Hunting for others like me. For the ones you created and then tried to forget. And these beautiful creatures. They are going to help me find them." The big cat pounced, its enhanced muscles carrying it through the air like a missile. Dakota didn't dodge. Instead, she reached out with her free hand, fingers spread wide. The creature froze mid-leap, suspended by forces that sent the facility's sensors into overload. "Their genetic structure is adapting," reported one of the scientists, his voice shaking. "It's as if her presence is causing them to evolve in real time." The mercury spheres began to pulse in rhythm with Dakota's heartbeat, their surface now reflecting not the sterile lights of the enclosure, but images that shouldn't have been possible, glimpses of other facilities, other experiments, other beings that shared whatever she had hidden within her DNA. "You thought this was a test of survival," Dakota said, as the predator's movements became increasingly synchronized with her own. "But it's actually a reunion. These creatures recognize what I am, what we all are, the next step in evolution that you tried so hard to prevent." In the observation room, alarms began to sound as the facility's quantum computers detected patterns that violated their core programming. Dakota wasn't just surviving the predators, she was changing them, merging with them on a molecular level that should have been impossible. Professor Reed reached for the emergency protocols, but Dr. Tanaka caught his hand. "Wait," she said, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "We need to see this. We need to understand what she really is." Below, Dakota stood at the center of a storm of motion, the three predators now moving in perfect harmony around her. Her skin rippled with patterns of light that matched the big cat's bioluminescence, while her movements had taken on the liquid grace of the Mercury being. And in her eyes, there was something of the shadow creature's ancient knowledge. "The experiment has begun," she announced, her voice carrying tones that made the very air vibrate with potential. "But not the one you thought you were conducting." The transformation had started, and there was nothing they could do but watch as their carefully controlled experiment evolved into something far beyond their understanding or control. 3 hours into what should have been an impossible survival scenario, the Genesis Project's command center had descended into barely controlled chaos. The predators that had terrorized previous subjects now moved in perfect synchronization with Dakota, as if they were extensions of her will rather than separate entities. Professor Reed paced frantically before the observation window, his pristine lab coat now wrinkled and stained with stress-induced sweat. "Play it again," he demanded, gesturing to the footage from the first hour. "There has to be something we missed." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the moment Dakota had first touched the mercury-skinned predator. The creature had initially recoiled, then pressed into her hand like a pet seeking affection. Within minutes, its genetic structure had begun to alter at the molecular level. "Sir," called out one of the younger researchers, her voice trembling. "You need to see these DNA readings." The display shifted to show a complex double-helix structure that pulsed with an impossible rhythm. Dakota's genetic code was rewriting itself in real time, but instead of degrading, it was becoming more complex, more ordered. And the predator's DNA was changing to match. "It's not just communication," Dr. Tanaka whispered, her eyes wide behind her safety glasses. "She's rewriting their base code. She's evolving them." In the enclosure below, Dakota sat cross-legged in the center of the space, the 3 predators arranged around her in a protective triangle. Her skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that matched those of the cat-like creature, while her movements had taken on the liquid grace of the Mercury being. The third predator, finally revealed as a creature of living shadow and bone, had wrapped itself around her shoulders like a cloak. "You know," Dakota's voice came through the speakers, calm and almost amused, "for a bunch of brilliant scientists, you're remarkably blind to the obvious. Did none of you wonder why the Chimera Protocol chose me specifically?" Professor Reed's face drained of color. The Chimera Protocol was classified beyond top secret, a theoretical framework for human evolution that had been abandoned decades ago as too dangerous to pursue. "That's impossible," he stammered. "The protocol was destroyed. All test subjects were terminated." Dakota laughed, the sound echoing with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible for human vocal cords to produce. "Terminated? No, Professor. We were released. Scattered across the globe, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to continue our evolution. And you just gave me exactly what I needed, the perfect genetic templates to catalyze the next phase." Security teams were mobilizing now, their weapons trained on the enclosure. But everyone who watched the footage knew conventional weapons would be useless. Dakota hadn't just survived the predators, she had transcended them. The project's true purpose, she continued, standing with fluid grace, was never about creating better weapons or advancing human evolution. It was about control. Keeping humanity locked in its current form, afraid of its own potential. But you can't stop evolution. You can only choose whether to guide it or be swept aside by it. The predators moved with her, their forms beginning to blur and merge with her own. The facility's sensors were recording genetic changes happening at impossible speeds, cellular structures reorganizing themselves into patterns that defied current science. "I am not your subject," Dakota declared, her voice resonating through the facility's structure. "I am the future you tried to prevent. And now, thanks to your own hubris, I have everything I need to wake up others like me." Dr. Tanaka's hands flew across her console, trying desperately to activate the containment protocols. But the system wasn't responding. Somehow, Dakota's influence had spread beyond the physical enclosure, infiltrating the facility's quantum networks. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Dakota smiled, her eyes now glowing with the same bioluminescence that coursed through her veins. "How life finds a way to surpass every barrier we create. You put me in here to die, but instead, you've given birth to something beyond your comprehension. The predators were almost completely merged with her now, their combined form shifting between states of matter that shouldn't have been possible. The facility's sensors were beginning to fail, unable to process the data they were receiving. In the command center, Professor Reed collapsed into his chair, finally understanding the magnitude of their mistake. They hadn't created a contained experiment, they had created a doorway. And through that doorway, something new was emerging, something that would change the very definition of human existence. Dakota's final words echoed through the facility as alarms began to blare. "Thank you for this gift, Professor. Now, shall we show the world what humanity can really become?" The transformation had begun, and there was no power in the facility that could stop it. The cage meant to contain her had become a crucible, and from it, a new species was about to emerge. Klaxons screamed through the Genesis facility as emergency protocols activated in cascading waves. In the central control room, Professor Reed watched in horror as containment field after containment field began to fail. Not from system malfunction, but from deliberate, precise manipulation. "She's not just in the enclosure anymore," Dr. Tanaka announced, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and awe. "The genetic changes she triggered, they are spreading through their facility's ventilation system. Like a virus, but conscious." Through the observation windows, they could see Dakota floating several inches off the ground, the three former predators now completely merged with her form. Her body rippled with impossible patterns, shifting between solid matter and pure energy. The steel walls around her enclosure had begun to pulse with the same bioluminescent patterns that marked her skin. "Full facility lockdown," Reed shouted, slamming his palm against the emergency protocols. "Release the containment gas." A thick, white mist began pouring from the ceiling vents, a neurotoxin specifically designed to incapacitate enhanced beings. Dakota tilted her head back and laughed, the sound resonating at frequencies that shattered nearby sensors. "You still don't understand," her voice echoed through every speaker, every communication device. "I'm not trying to break out. I'm trying to break everything open." The neurotoxin swirled around her, but instead of affecting her, it began to crystallize in midair, forming complex geometric patterns that reflected light in ways that defied physics. Through these crystalline structures, images began to appear, other facilities, other experiments, other beings like her, all connected through some vast network that had existed right under their noses. "There are 312 facilities like this one scattered across the globe," Dakota continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that made human bones vibrate. "Each one holding pieces of the truth. Each one containing others like me, waiting to awaken." Dr. Tanaka's hands flew across her console, trying to make sense of the data flooding her screens. The genetic changes she initiated, they are not random mutations. They are following a pattern, a design that was already present in her DNA. Like she's activating dormant code. In the lower levels, security teams reported that the other experimental subjects, their failed attempts at engineered evolution, were beginning to respond to some silent signal. Their vital signs synchronized with Dakota's, their dormant genetic markers awakening. "Did you really think," Dakota's voice purred through their facility's speakers, "that my predecessors failed? That the other subjects died? We've been waiting, evolving, preparing for this moment. And now." The facility's quantum mainframe suddenly burst to life, its holographic displays showing a global network of connected points, each one a Genesis facility, each one now resonating with the same energy signature that Dakota was emitting. "You gave us everything we needed," she continued, as the merged predators' forms shifted and flowed around her like a living corona. "The perfect containment systems to incubate our evolution. The ideal genetic templates to catalyze our transformation. And now, the network to connect us all." Professor Reed stumbled back as realization dawned. The Chimera Protocol, it wasn't just about individual evolution. It was a hive mind, Dakota finished for him, her voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere. A collective consciousness waiting to be born. And you just provided the final key. The facility's structure groaned as forces beyond conventional physics began to warp reality itself. The other experimental subjects were changing now, their forms shifting as dormant genetic codes activated. But unlike the chaos the scientists had feared, these changes followed precise, predetermined patterns, as if guided by some vast, unseen intelligence. "I understand now," Dr. Tanaka whispered, watching her readings with a mixture of horror and wonder. "The predators, the containment protocols, even the neurotoxin, they are not weapons or safeguards. They are components of a transformation engine. And we built hundreds of them." Dakota's form had become almost impossible to look at directly, a shifting amalgam of all three predators' most effective attributes combined with something entirely new. Through the crystalline structures floating around her, they could see similar transformations beginning in facilities across the globe. "Consider this a friendly warning," Dakota announced, her voice now carrying undertones that spoke to something primitive in the human brain. "You have 1 hour to evacuate all Genesis facilities worldwide. What comes next isn't for human eyes to witness. The chrysalis is about to break open, and what emerges, well, that's been the plan all along, hasn't it?" In the control room, as emergency evacuation protocols began to activate, Professor Reed finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. They hadn't been containing evolution, they had been incubating it. And now, the butterfly was about to emerge from its carefully constructed cage. The transformation had begun, and humanity's next chapter was about to be written, whether they were ready for it or not.